Hello, everyone. Jim Coventry from RotoWire with today's NFL training camp news and notes from a fantasy football perspective. Let's start out with the Raiders rushing attack. So, according to Deshaun Reed and Vic Tafur of The Athletic, Amir Abdullah and Brandon Bolden could both have roles in a likely backfield committee. Let's think about this a little bit here. So, first of all, McDaniels comes from New England, many years there. Was it Bill Belichick's offense? Was it McDaniel's offense? Was it the combination of both? Regardless, we saw many different configurations of backfield usage while in New England. And I have to say, based on early reports in Las Vegas, it's looking like the same to me. Now, remember, earlier this offseason, the Raiders did not pick up Josh Jacobs' fifth-year option, so that tells me this is his last year there. And then they drafted Zamir White, inside grinder, pounder back, which is an excellent thing. And so now there's instant potential for a combination there. If the team wants to see what they have in White, they're motivated to use him. The motivation to use Jacobs would probably have to be significantly better to carve out a massive amount of work over White. So we're a little bit concerned. Both could be factors at the goal. It's messy right now. Remember what we said for many years with New England. Draft the cheapest option. Well, in terms of the early down backs, Josh Jacobs is still going as a top 24 running back. And that's reasonable. He's been a very talented player. We have questions about production, but nonetheless, when he's on the field, he's been good. But he needs to have a workload. If White cuts into that, Jacobs has real downside at running back 24, whereas White's being drafted at running back 54. So the point in the draft, you're drafting White means you have little to no risk. You could drop him early in the season and not feel bad about it if he doesn't have much of a role. Now, certainly if Jacobs takes the job, he can outperform that ADP, but it sure sounds, with all the little buzz that's coming through the camp in Las Vegas, that there is a really good chance Jacobs loses work. Now, that brings us to the passing downs. It's been filtered out there that Amir Abdullah could take on the James White role. And Amir Abdullah, look, his career has been not exactly what we hoped it would be, but nonetheless, he is still an explosive player. He can be an effective receiver. And, James White, at the end of the day, he had a specific skill set. And if Abdullah can even somewhat replicate that, he's going as running back 74 in drafts. But if he's going to have a receiving role, if you're in a PPR league, that's a dart worth throwing late. Because look, every week it wasn't like James White was going off in New England, but he had a lot of big games. And if you get a game where the Raiders are projected to be in a shootout or trail, Abdullah could have some really high upside at some very low draft costs. Now, Brandon Bolden obviously typically goes undrafted. He's a special teamer who does mix in the backfield. It would be unlikely if all these backs were healthy and if Abdullah played reasonably well that Bolden wouldn't have a consistent enough role to be drafted in typical fantasy leagues. But if Abdullah doesn't really do much with that job, Bolden does exactly what the coaches need him to do and would be reliable. So just a lot of food for thought in that Raiders rushing attack. But I think, again, the cheaper spending may end up being the wiser spending. Injuries, Darren Waller. So he was out for weeks with a hamstring injury. They called it an undisclosed injury. Practiced on August 17th, and the next day, the 18th, he's been out since, so almost another week. They're calling it undisclosed, but it sounds like it's probably that same hamstring. I'm guessing it's a pretty logical assumption. Setback injuries could be very problematic, could cost more time than the initial injury. Now, Josh McDaniel won't commit to Waller's return timeline, but I see that as being problematic. Now, look, if you're drafting a second tight end and you're in a one tight end league, bye weeks don't start for 6 weeks. You could get by. That's fine. Personally, if you've got Darren Waller close with maybe George Kittle, maybe ahead of Kittle, maybe you think about, do I want to move Kittle ahead of him because Kittle's healthy right now, whereas Waller's not? And maybe you keep him status quo. But I think at least you should think about the possibility of a minor downgrade in case this becomes a lingering issue. Again, look at your roster. If you have like maybe a Cole Kmet in there to step in, depending where you're drafting your second tight end, you may think, okay, it's worth the wait. But again, just understand there's some little bit of risk baked in here. Now, Damian Harris, this is not an official injury thing that we know of. He did leave Wednesday's practice, walked off the field unassisted. It was an undisclosed injury. I'm only telling you this in case you draft tonight, that there could be some uncertainty. May not be anything, maybe something, but I at least want you to know that he left the field. Just with that backfield in general, earlier in the offseason, I was touting Ramondre Stevenson ahead of Harris, and a lot of people think I was nutty, but now the ADP for weeks has actually supported that. Stevenson went ahead. Now the talk of Stevenson being involved on passing downs with James White. I don't even know that White officially retired, but they said he would retire. But I know in the RotoWire database, it still says that he's on the roster. But again, he's not playing. And if somebody's going to take on that passing down role, and Stevenson was good in limited pass targets last year, but he really has looked good in camp as well. Hey, Mr. Nick, good to see you. So, so that's what we're looking at there. So, again, Harris's injury may be nothing. Monitor it. But I still like Stevenson in that backfield because if he's going to get passing down work, we always know the value of a target is far more valuable than that of a rushing attempt. Now, Logan Thomas, I brought him up a couple days ago, but he came up again in the news today, participated in 7-on-7 drills Wednesday, and coach – oh, man, I can't think of his name. Oh, my gosh, I'm sorry. Can't think of his name. The coach said he's hopefully, Logan Thomas, ready to go in week one. Will he be ready week one? Maybe, maybe not. Ron Rivera. Sorry, it took me a minute there. Having an older person moment there. And so anyway, Ron Rivera hopes Thomas is ready week one. Well, what that tells me is this. He's probably going to be ready early in the season. Maybe not week one, maybe week 2, week 3. It sounds like he's close. According to the report, he was cutting in practice, didn't catch any balls, but he was cutting well. That ACL injury he suffered, I believe, in December. So, look, Logan Thomas is going outside the top 20 tight ends, roughly 24. And if you can get him as a late second tight end, he can finish as a top 15 tight end, maybe even a little better. Carson Wentz, I know he was throwing to Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia, but it may have been also that he likes big targets in the middle of the field. And if that's the case, Logan Thomas fits that. Now, 2 years ago, Logan Thomas put over 600 yards, scored a fair number of touchdowns. And last year, before he got hurt, he was on a fair pace again. Wasn't quite the pace, but not far off from him. So Logan Thomas, if he's healthy, could get you a 500 to 600 yard season. And at tight end, you're really not complaining about that. So again, if you need a late tight end, maybe you drafted one that's a little bit sketchy, he might not be a bad idea. And like I say, if he doesn't work out in 2-3 weeks, drop him, pick up somebody else. Byron Pringle, I know he's going outside the top 100 receivers, an afterthought in drafts. He's had that quad injury. He's missed almost a whole camp. Probably won't play this weekend, although it's not been confirmed yet. But that said, look, Pringle probably is a starting receiver for the Bears. And I know their line is horrible. They're going to trail a lot. As outside the top 100 pick, as maybe a wide receiver 7, I could see Pringle working out a bit. I could see that being these. If it's a best ball league too, where you might get 3 or 4 weeks that are usable, that's fine. Is he going to contribute every week? Unlikely. Very unlikely. It's a Darnell Mooney and tight end Cole Kmet offense. That's going to be the passing game. But again, for that late, depending how deep your league is, Pringle might not be the worst stash in the world. Zach Wilson, quarterback of the Jets. So August 16th, so that's about 8 days ago, he had arthroscopic knee surgery. Coach Robert Saleh hasn't given a timetable for his return. Says week 1 he won't commit to week 1. Right now, it's looking like Joe Flacco could play week 1. Obviously, it's unlikely you're starting him in fantasy. But you know what? We saw Elijah Moore especially do well with 3 different quarterbacks last year. So don't rule him out regardless of who's a quarterback. I mean, they're saying Flacco's having a good camp, fine. Well, earlier in the season's better for a seasoned veteran like that while he's got the most gas in the tank. But like I said, you're not starting Flacco, but I think Elijah Moore, I think you're kind of cool running him as you might normally anyway. And then job battles, Mike Davis. So being drafted outside the top 75 running backs, but probably not for long. So We said yesterday, Gus Edwards out at least 4 weeks. And then we don't know about J.K. Dobbins yet. It keeps getting, sketchy on the news. Maybe week 1, maybe not. We don't know if he'll be there. It may not be 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We have no idea. So right now, the report that was given is that Davis could see significant work early in the season. Well, yes, that's the case. Now, look, Mike Davis, in my opinion, below replacement level player. He runs hard. He could do a little bit he does everything good. A little bit of receiving, a little bit of blocking, a little bit of interior running. Definitely a player that is not outstanding, especially at this stage of his career. However, in Baltimore, the mobile quarterback, Lamar Jackson, they've got the offensive line should be better. Ronnie Stanley hopefully is recovering from that injury. Tyler Linderbaum's at center. Hopefully they're in a better place. They're going to run some 2 tight end sets. Mike Davis, if you're thin at running back and you're late in your draft and you're 65, 70 running backs in and he's still on the board, if you need him early in the season, sometimes you just need production early in the season, especially if you went with a light running back build. So he could be useful early in the season while you fish out other options. And then let's talk about Jeff Wilson. So ESPN's Nick Wagner, he's been covering the 49ers for a while. He says that Jeff Wilson seems like the best bet to get the first shot at being the primary backup. Now, it doesn't surprise me. The reason so, last year, we saw Wilson with a career low 3.7 yards per carry, but he was coming back from a significant injury. And I knew that already, but in the quote I was reading where Kyle Shanahan talked, he basically said Jeff Wilson was just playing with heart last year because he was, and I'm adding the rest, he was not ready to play, but he was out there gutting it out for his team, doing the best he can. Well, now he's apparently back to full health, and we've seen Jeff Wilson can be successful if needed in this 49er system where, look, think what you will, Tyrann Davis-Price might be the next great superstar. Some people love him a lot. Mario Puig, my colleague on Saturdays, big college scout, and I mean, he works as a scout, but that's what he kind of does. And basically, he's out on him. I think if Wilson has the crack, Wilson's going to keep that job unless Davis-Price really blows the roof off. But from the sounds of things that have happened in camp, certainly doesn't sound that way. So late round pick, especially if you've got Elijah Mitchell shares, maybe you'd have a Jeff Wilson share as a backup. And then finally, this one's a minor piece of news, and I'll get any questions at the end of this. Mitch Trubisky, and Kenny Pickett. So Trubisky confirmed the reporters. There hasn't been an official announcement of who will start a quarterback. Wonderful. So, look, in terms of the quarterbacks, I know some people are drafting Trubisky outside the top 20 quarterbacks. He has mobility. He won people a couple milli makers. That mobility makes him viable as a QB2. Kenny Pickett, we're not quite sure, but we do know they have weapons. The offensive line is a little bit frustrating. They may not be able to protect them consistently, but they do have 3 potentially good receivers. Chase Claypool is running from the slot a lot, and that's big because in today's 2 high shells, the slot area to field is open, and Claypool is massive, strong. And if they get him the ball, he can make a lot happen in the middle of the field. So he may not be the player he thought he was, but he may end up being something. But I still think George Pickens is the guy who's been lighting it up. And I think there are going to be a lot of 3 receiver sets run. They're all in the field. But in the pecking order, I have moved George Pickens ahead of Claypool. But I'm going to have to start to think this. The more we hear about the slot, that slot could be very valuable if that offensive line doesn't hold up. So it just got a little trickier here. All right. And so anyway, that's what I have for today. I have questions here. I have one in the hopper. I'll take that question. If anybody else has a question, put it in and I'll answer it. JBK. Would you keep Diggs for a 5th or Gabriel Davis for a 21st? So, all right. I think Gabriel Davis will have a really good season. I think he will. But I know Steph Diggs has had 160 plus targets 2 years in a row. And I really feel that last year was a down year for Diggs. His yardage was down, even though his targets were up. But that said, Stephon Diggs is elite. And getting him for a 5th round, he really is a borderline 1st round player. And I think if you're getting a 1st round player for a 5th round, I think that 4 rounds is magnified way more than that. Whereas Gabriel Davis, yeah, he's like a 5th round pick, 4th-ish, 5th round, things like that. But I think that when you go lower in your draft, you're always adding more downside to the players. The range of outcomes is much wider. So if you're swinging for the fence, sure. But I think for a 5th round pick, who are you going to get in the 5th round anyway? The 21st, fine, but at that point, doesn't even matter. So I think it's got to be Diggs in the 5th because that floor certainty, and he has his ceiling has to be way higher than Davis as well. So I think you're going to ride that. The 5th round is very, very reasonable. All right, I don't see any other questions here. Always, I appreciate people being in with me today, and we will catch you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day.